Hello there, and welcome to Speaking of Our Words, radio programming that brings you the writings and the workings of local area writers and allows you a little insight into their writing process. My name is Chris DeGuire. I teach creative writing workshops at Columbia College Chicago, and I will be your host. Well, we only have a number of folks in the studio today, so we only have a few pieces to hear. We don't have any special guests today, but the first piece I'm going to read is from regular contributor Richard Bell, and this is a short called Bad Pencils. It was an ordinary day in the office supply store. People were shopping for back-to-school supplies, and all the parents were happy, and many of the children were sad because for them, school was a hellhole with no escape. A woman with 2 children approached the pencil display and saw a pack that contained the nicest-looking yellow pencils she had ever seen in her life, and lifted them up. That's when the pencils let out a piercing scream that shattered everyone's nerves and gave each person there a serious heart attack. The pencils jumped out of their package and rolled to the door, then went outside. Once in the sunshine, these mutant pencils began to grow at an alarming rate as they realized their true power. They tripped people and flattened car tires in the parking lot and then moved down the highway, still screaming and growing larger. The mayor immediately called up the teachers' union, and close to 100 teachers and substitutes attacked with scissors, paper, and glasses of vodka with little umbrellas. But they were no match for the wicked pencils. The mayor called the governor, who didn't believe him at first, but after seeing the carnage on live television, got the lead out and called the National Guard. The Guard mobilized and engaged the giant pencils with all sorts of artillery, but nothing could stop them. They continued on and caused countless millions of dollars worth of damage. The president was notified, and he called out the full force of the military. The city was encircled by the best fighting troops, but the pencils blazed a path through the perimeter, fighting and killing and making check marks everywhere, then headed for the coastline. Picture to yourself lots of smoke and flames here. Once at the beach, they endured a fierce bombardment from the Navy, who opened up with everything they had, approximately 5,642 shells, which exploded on or near the evil pencils. It had no effect whatsoever. At his wit's end, the president placed an urgent phone call to Valentine Jablonski, a local man who had once sharpened a pencil down to nothing just for the fun of it. Valentine turned off his TV, grabbed his scout knife and lucky pencil case, and headed for the beach to confront the pencils, disguised as a walrus. No one knows why. When he arrived, the pencils were sunning themselves and listening to techno-trance music and took no notice of him. Running faster than ever, Valentine began slicing up the pencils and throwing the shavings all over the place. The pencils screamed like crazy, but it didn't bother Valentine because he had heard lots of screaming when he was growing up. Eventually, the pencils were whittled down to little nubs and lost all their power. Valentine drove home and continued watching television. The end. Richard Bell, thank you very much. All right, next up here we have Walter Gascoigne. Hello, Walter.
Hello, Chris.
Walter, what do you have for us today?
3 pieces. 2 are mine, and 1 is somebody else's.
All right, very good. Walter Gascoigne, take it away.
All right, the first one is, Chris, you'll recognize this. You judged this for a contest, flash fiction contest I did. It's called The Wake Up Call. Paul was always clumsy. As a child, his mother would put him in elbow pads, shin guards, and a helmet and take him to the store. He fell down 4 flights of stairs, broke his leg, and cracked 2 ribs when he was 8. It was no surprise when he bumped into a street sign as he was checking the status updates on Facebook. He watched as his phone tumbled to the pavement, shattering into a dozen pieces. Falling to his knees, he began scooping up the pieces, trying to put them back together, with little success. He began to cry, bawling like a baby, until his tears subsided as he slowly stood up. Looking around while people walked past, too intent on their own cell phones to notice him, cars whizzed by with drivers clutching the wheels one-handed while holding their phones with the other, barely glancing at the road as they rushed past. He noticed a man in a house sitting in front of his big-screen TV, not watching it, only gaping at his phone as he typed a message. A young couple rode by on bicycles. their phones attached to their handlebars and wireless headphones attached to their heads. Down the street was a policeman directing traffic after an accident, cell phone to his ear. Without his phone to tell him the directions home, he was utterly lost. Trying to stop the nearest pedestrian, he politely asked for help finding his way home, but the man proceeded past him like Paul didn't exist. He also tried asking the policeman, whose only response was to tell him to use his phone to find his way home. Before he could explain that he had no phone, the policeman rushed to his vehicle, mumbling something about his wife must never find out, and desperately punched at his phone screen. Paul began walking to where he did not know, but as he looked around for the first time in his life, he noticed how much of the world he had never seen before. The blue sky, the budding apple blossoms, the smell of lavender and roses. He felt less clumsy, more confident. He did not trip or bump into anything as the sights, sounds, and smells bombarded his senses, dropping pieces of his phone as he continued down the street. And the second piece is a little difficult to explain. It was a project for a class, and all the writers that are mentioned in here are American writers, and I had to incorporate every American author that we read into some sort of poem. So I kind of borrowed a little bit from Edgar Allan Poe, and this was the result. It's called The Writer, or Writers. Once upon a summer cheery, while I pondered blurry and silly over many authors' great works of unforgotten lore, while I studied John Smith's cunning, suddenly I saw him running, as if someone quickly strutting through Virginia's door. "'Tis Pocahontas," I muttered, strutting through Virginia's door. Only her and Indians galore. Ah, distinctly I remember, it was in the snowy December, when William Bradford sat on Plymouth Rock upon the shore. Eagerly he knew for sure that this was indeed Zion's new shore. For his travels galore, he knew he would see Holland nevermore. For America was his new angel, and he would be with her evermore. Governor in Plymouth evermore. And there sat Anne Bradstreet, contemplating a house that was out of her reach. It thrilled her, filled her with fantastic insights on God's amour. So now we see Samuel Sewall asserting, with his words he is repeating, "'Tis some convicted witches I have wronged upon this floor, some poor persons who did no wrong upon this floor. I shall hope to be forgiven evermore." Presently Edward Taylor grew stronger, because the Lord was with him longer. "Sir," said he, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact I am friends with Mather should not upset or bother, for it 'twas his father, not the younger Mather, that I explore." Mather now spoke. "Many volumes have I wrote, for I am Puritan to the core. I believe in the Lord and nothing more." Deep into the light stood peering John Woolman, seeing a light burning, certain evidence of divine truth that no mortal hath seen before. But his silence was unbroken, for God's love was his token, and the only word there spoken were Jonathan Edwards' exalted lore. Thus he whispered, and a congregation said, "I believe in the Lord forevermore, only him and no one more." Back into his chamber turning, Ben Franklin's hopes were in him burning, soon to have his own yearning to be a better man than before. "Surely," said he, "surely there is something in electricity. Let me see, then, what this doth mean, and this mystery explore. Let me grasp this one mystery with key, so that I shall know one more. 'Tis a storm approaching, nothing more." Open here, pained through his letter, when one which he knew could be no better. In there he called for common sense, a prelude to independence upon his shores. Not the least homage to England gave he, not a minute man 'twas that did not like thee. But Thomas, like lord or lady, challenged Britain even more. Challenged Britain even more, just inside our country's door, and will challenge them evermore. Then an ebony man came beguiling my sad fancy into crying. By his scars and his polite manner, I knew the countenance he wore. Aloda Aquina, was but one of my names, he said. Black men here must live in shame, but one day I shall find my freedom on these strange new shores. Tell my master that I shall work for him, nevermore. Quoth Alada, nevermore. Much I marveled at Phyllis Wheatley, whose poetry comes off so very sweetly, though she was to be treated nicely on America's faraway shore. Now I cannot help but agreeing that Washington Irving was a great human being, ever writing the scenes he was seeing, like a master tailor of lore. Horsemen headless and old men bedless, stories he wrote before, forgotten here, nevermore. But William Cullen Bryant, sitting lonely, wrote but one word only. That one word, Thanatopsis, in his soul did he outpour. Nothing more could he utter, for the truth of it made him shudder, till he thought and muttered, the world has known others before. On the morrow earth shall guide me, with hopes I have not known before. Then he said, rest in dirt evermore. Startled by his life being broken, Poe replied so aptly spoken, doubtless, said he, what I miss is my lost love Lenore, caught from my grasp by death's most hideous red mask. Followed fast and followed faster till his poems his loss did bore, till he found no hope and nothing more to try and live for. Poe shall write nevermore. But Emerson, still beguiling, turned my sad soul into smiling. Straight he wielded a scorching pen for all the men whose souls are poor. There, upon self-reliance thinking, he took himself to linking fact unto fact, drinking in new thoughts never thought before. What his words, wisdom, and writing taught me, I will always store. Transcendentalism, evermore. This Thoreau sat engaged in guessing, action not words was his expressing, to the fowl whose fine eyes caught his attention more. This and more he sat divining, by Walden's pond he was reclining. On a chair of his designing, he wrote by lamplight to explore, but those times for him were not trying, for he had wrote before. Civil disobedience, evermore. Then Hawthorne took to answer all the questions of man's cancer, swung by passions of pagan dancers that beg the question, is there good in man's core? Which, he wrote, Goodman Brown doth know thee, to the devil's forest he has sent thee. Respite, and be neutral men no more. Take off this veil about men's faces, so we may throw them to the floor. Quoth the minister, nevermore. Hiawatha, said Longfellow, an epic poem, song of Hiawatha he was born to roam. Whether west wind sent or whether bowstring bent, he knew the score. Magnificent and undaunted on this great continent uncharted. He left his home for the food he wanted. Tell me, is there corn, he implored? Is there corn near Gitchagumi? Tell me, he implored. Quoth Mondamin, forevermore. Myself, said Walt Whitman, thing for good or thing for evil, I shall write like an American should. By no meter shall I endure. Free verse is the tool I shall explore. My soul will not be burdened, for I write from the American Aiden. Now there came a gifted maiden, Emily Dickinson, from Amherst shore. Clasping poems without titles laden, she preferred to write them more. She was married, nevermore. By my words humor I have imparted, for young and old alike, Mark Twain said, then departed. Get me back to the river and Mississippi's muddy shore. Leave no black man as a token, Huck Finn would have spoken. Leave my body unbroken, Haley's Comet is at my door. Take my words unto your heart, laughter is the best medicine for the poor. Quoth Clemens, laugh some more. And Alan McCune, never failing, always answers our professor's mailings about his book Angeline that I found at the bookstore. And his characters have all the seeming about people who are dreaming, about their passions streaming, till their souls lie bleeding more. And my soul from out of these authors' shadows has been changed to the core. These authors shall be with me evermore. And the last speech is not mine. So I guess it's not speaking of our words, it's speaking of their words, but it's the Great Dictator speech from Charlie Chaplin's 1940 movie, his first talkie. And this speech has as much meaning today as it did 75 years ago. Okay, the Great Dictator speech. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone, if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there is room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery gives abundance, has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate. Only the unloved hate. The unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery. Fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke, it is written, the kingdom of God is within man. Not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then, in the name of democracy, let us use this power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite.
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed that. The second piece you read, the assignment you had there, what was the nature of that assignment? What was the assignment that was given to you?
It was second fable for critics. She wanted every person that I mentioned in there was the American authors that we had to read. There were more, but these were like the main ones we stuck to, and we had to incorporate them into not necessarily a poem. It could have been free verse or a story, but I had to incorporate every single person somehow and give a little explanation as to who they were into that story or poem. Mm-hmm. And I tried to take like the best qualities that I learned from each of the authors, either one of their famous works or what they were known for, their humor or their poetry, and try to incorporate that. This one was very difficult. I did two other pieces like this, one with Peter Pan as a vampire and one with the first 5 chapters of the Bible of Genesis. And I try to stick word for word with the not word for word, but the cadence and
the beats.
Yeah,
sure.
And the beats and if there's an S sound, the all that I tried to stick with, and it's really, really hard.
Oh,
So
yeah.
instead of, I could have made this assignment like probably a 2-hour assignment. Instead, it ended up taking about 10 hours to hash it all out.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, good job. Well, Walter Gascoigne, thank you very much. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and next up is Troy McDonald. Hello, Troy.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good, real good, Troy. Troy, tell us a little bit about what you have to read today.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because this first piece is from a Facebook post that I have, and I saw all of these stories that were going on with Bill Cosby, Ariana Grande, and Justin Bieber, and how they all kind of had one common theme through each of them. So this piece is called Cosby on a Subway with Ariana Grande and her donut up Justin Bieber's ass.
All right, Troy McDonald, take it away.
2015. It is 2015. In the most progressive era in human history. It's amazing. Yet no one seems to know anything anymore. We should be the smartest people of all time. If you want to know about geometry or the history of the entire Roman Empire, it's literally at our fingertips. However, people, and important people at that, are stupider than they've ever been. Bill Cosby, after months of scrutiny, admitted to giving women drugs to have sex with them. This after a 2005 court document was unsealed. Dr. Huxtable, Google it, was a beloved figure, reputation destroyed. Jared Fogle, the spokesman for Subway, his home was raided by the FBI over the potential of child pornography. No child charges have been filed yet. However, the government wouldn't raid a home unless something substantial was there. Reputation potentially destroyed. Ariana Grande and her new boyfriend licked donuts on an open countertop while being filmed, TMZ discovered. She said she also hates America for eating big fat donuts. Reputation, albeit slightly, damaged. Justin Bieber broke the internet when he flashed his bare ass on Instagram. If you're curious, it's instagram.com/Justin Bieber. Reputation, jackass. These stories are connected. If you are a famous and important person, you either have to share every aspect of your life, literally, or hide and conceal mistakes. But you can't hide in 2015. Some things are better left unsaid, as Ariana Grande sung in 2013 on Yours Truly. Google it. And better left unseen. If and when you make a mistake, the system that builds you up tears you down. Bad news travels even faster in a TMZ PerezHilton.com world. Bill Cosby and Jared Fogle deserve everything that's coming to them. Ariana will recover, and Justin Bieber is, well, Justin Bieber. However, I hope they learn that the millions they make 15 years from now are directly impacted by the decisions they make today in 2015. This second one is a personal piece. Like I mentioned, I've been writing on Facebook like these 5-paragraph essays, so I was looking for a new medium to post longer form work, and so I found this website called medium.com, and so I started writing longer form pieces on there, and this was my first one, and it's called In a Bubble with Amy Winehouse. Facebook announced last week that it will allow users to list who they want to see in their timelines. Odds are you already knew this. We live in a bubble. We don't want to hear from anyone we disagree with. The way we treat each other, refusing to listen, is just as sad as the politicians who serve us. But how dare I point the finger at us, right? It's all their fault. I don't know what it was about Amy Winehouse, but I've always had a connection to her. The critically acclaimed documentary about her life, Amy, was released July 10th. The picture above, which it shows her winning the Grammy in 2008, her look of fear and panic while others celebrate her talent in the background, is the story of my life. We're all versions of the photo in some way. We all want to know, am I okay? You like me, you really like me, only to feel like we let people down. Amy lived in her own bubble. It was easier for her to drink and disappear than to let people down. She'd rather die than fail at being the image of the great Amy Winehouse. The people who should have saved her made too much money off the destruction, and she became worth more dead than alive. Amy Winehouse died at the age of 27, and I refuse to be categorized and labeled. I don't define myself. The moment you succumb to a label, a title, the system wins. It seemed inevitable that Amy would die. Amy died the way we wanted her to die. Painfully, beautifully, thunderously, and on the big silver screen. And we applaud in our bubbles. This next piece is from, again, Facebook. This is kind of before I moved to Medium. But I was seeing, the gay marriage, obviously equality passed, the Supreme Court acknowledged that. And what I was seeing was hatred on both sides, and so I wanted to kind of address that. What happened, America? We're making such big strides forwards as every generation moves the needle just a tad more. Yet the petty and embarrassing remarks on Facebook make my heart break on both sides of the argument. I've seen photos of LGBT people mocking Christianity, which is counterintuitive and disrespectful. I've seen Christians who preach the gospel threaten to kill others and or themselves, which is the very antithesis of what God wants. I'm not religious in the least, but everyone has a right to practice their religion and not be persecuted. However, generations of pent-up rage and frustration came out at the pride parades. We just added flame to an already hot proverbial fire. We don't need to play up to Christians and try to get them to see the light, no pun intended, but to mock Jesus is fighting fire, which never works. You fight fire with love, and it's difficult, I get that. In a world with keyboard courage and internet dreams, we find it hard to be quiet for 3 minutes, let alone find anything nice to say, and God forbid, listen to someone. Again, on both sides of the argument. For Christians, as well as those who have deep-rooted beliefs, I respect that. The values enriched in the church are deep. To make light of and a mockery of is a disservice to them and us. Will there ever be common ground? Probably not. Not every issue gets solved, and that's okay. This is not a Googleable, if that's a word, or Siri-fixable issue. Posting hate only further divides, and that is not helpful for the United States. ISIS and other terror groups won't ask, "Are you gay or straight?" You're American, so they want all of us dead. So let's keep the debate going. Let's share our beliefs, peacefully and with respect. Maybe one day we can truly reach that mountaintop where people are judged for the content of their character, and let God, Allah, the universe, or no God at all, do the rest. I'm on my way, climbing that big mountain with grace, humility, and respect for all. And this, oh goodness, I'm a little bit nervous about this last one. It's literally the most personal piece that I've ever written, and it's something I worked on almost a month ago at this point. And so I don't even want to kind of give a backstory on it. I just want you to kind of listen and, hopefully it goes well. I'll never forget that orange tint, the warm glow in the dead of winter, looking up, wondering, is this my life? Hoping the cops wouldn't find out where we were, scared and hopeless, mindful and attentive, losing faith, realizing strength was the only option. Grit. Orange tint made it hard to sleep. When you open your eyes every second to see if you are safe, hoping that no one takes anything else from you, that 2 tons of steel and a sunroof protect you. The closer to sunrise, the safer I felt. I don't think that's a coincidence. Sunrise means safety, until you realize it's all an illusion if you don't pay your bills. No such thing as safety when all of your possessions sit in the back of a Chevy. Orange tint. Here you are again. Another night, another one-eyed sleep. Cold as hell, mentally lukewarm. Fear is palpable, hoping to see the next sunrise. Chevy running, heat blasting, doors locked. I got here by no mistake of my own. I did everything right. I was at the top of my game, yet lost it all. I'm on my own. I told myself that since 12. My mom taught me how to beg other people to take care of me. I chose not to use that card. I have too much pride. Orange tint. It could have controlled my life. I continued going to school. I got up, somehow picked myself up off the ground. Orange tint. I graduated. Orange tint. I will never see you again.
All right. Yeah, that was great. That was wonderful. I think one of the worst questions you can ever ask a writer is if that really happened to them. And unless you specifically tell us this is an essay, this is an opinion piece, or whatever you sort of preempt it with, this is something that I tell my students. I just assume that everything is fiction. There's something to be said about your first three pieces, though, and while I'm sitting here listening to them, and I try to stay up with what's going on in pop culture, it's just so hard not to because we're just bombarded, all over the place with it. Do you remember the days before the internet? When we weren't bombarded with these things every 3 minutes.
You know what? It's really funny you bring that up because my mother was interviewed for the local paper in Lake County. And it's literally one of the first pictures I remember of myself. And the picture was my mother standing in front of me and my brother at a computer. So it's really all that I've ever known. I mean, we were playing games. We weren't on the internet. But I remember going to Walmart and getting the American Online, CDs. So that's always been a part of my life. But so no, I don't remember what it was like.
This summer I'm teaching what's called High School Summer Institute class, where I've got juniors going into their senior year of high school or seniors who've just graduated going on to college. And they can come to Columbia College, and a number of the programs offer an introductory course to their programs. And I'm teaching the one in fiction writing this year. And sometimes I get a chance to teach some of the lower level workshops too, where majority of the students are, 18, 19 years old. Mm-hmm. And I'm just waiting for that first class to come in where they don't know what a notebook is. They don't know how to actually write their name with a pen or a pencil because, I just have a feeling that it's coming soon. But what always surprises me though is that, this year is not it. The group of students that I have this year, they're all into writing. They're all into reading. They like books. Sometimes I got this one guy who forgets to bring a pen every other day, but it's still something that they're still very much interested in. So I think that's I think that's wonderful.
And it's interesting you say that because every generation goes, well, this one's the one that's going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
But vinyl record sales are up 200-something%, this year. So I think there's always going to be this kind of undying need to, even if you weren't a part of that generation,
Sure.
to see what was going on during the past generations.
I agree.
And to experience that.
I agree. I totally agree. All right. Well, Troy McDonald, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words, and our next reader is going to be me. And I've got an excerpt here from this ongoing book about the high school senior who lost his brother in a car accident. He's got a job working at a grocery store, sort of worst summer job / last year of high school story. This is a moment that comes, I don't know, probably about 2/3 of the way into the book, maybe about halfway. I'm not quite sure yet. I think all you need to know is that Jason, who's one of the main characters here, is on his first date with Courtney, a co-worker at the grocery store. They're both seniors together, and they are going to the Renaissance Fair on the last day. It's Labor Day. It's the first day before classes. And this is a rewrite. I'm still sort of tinkering with it. I'm still trying to work out some of the imagery of the thing, but we're just going to jump right into this scene. All right. They got out, and the first thing he noticed were people dressed up in flowing dresses and gowns as pirates and knights. Nerd Central, he muttered as Courtney joined him on the other side of the car. Yeah, folks like to dress up around here. Do they get a discount? I don't think so. My dad knows some of the guys that run this place, so we usually get free tickets. But I haven't been out here since last year. Dressing up is just part of the fun. They trudged up side by side, Jason wondering if he should hold her hand. He decided not yet. Do you own any costumes? He asked when they made it up the hill to the ticket booths and the main entrance, a giant facade of Renaissance-looking buildings, complete with balconies. No, but I'd love to own some. What would you dress up as? Oh, anything. Maybe a bar wench or... And here she lunged forward as if stabbing something. Maybe a knight with a sword. She stood back up, stumbled, and laughed as Jason caught her, arms around her tiny waist. His hands felt firm, but he let go right away, feeling scared and awkward touching her. Easy there, King Arthur. My dad gave me some spending money, so maybe I'll buy a sword or something. They approached the entrance, and Courtney handed the tickets to a young girl sitting on a wooden rail, wearing a hat, flowing dress, bodice, and lots of cleavage. Jason tried not to stare. "Welcome, my lord and lady," she said, trying to sound Old English. Buildings lined the perimeter, and directly in front was a small grassy area with benches, trees, and all sorts of people wandering. "Isn't this cool?" she asked, smiling broadly, looking left and right. She loved coming out here. "It's different." He wasn't quite sure what to make of it. About half the people wore some sort of costume. Women with cleavage pumped up, men in puffy shirts, and kids with little wooden swords. It looked fun, but not something he'd want to go to all the time, or felt totally interested. He knew she wanted him to like it, but she felt his mild disinterest. "I'm thirsty," she said, grabbing his hand and leading him down the right to a gravel path. She had him tight and pulled, and he tried to hurry to catch up, but her hand felt nice. This was the first time he'd held a girl's hand. He knew it wasn't a romantic hold, but a hold nevertheless. Up a ways in some shade, she bought 2 sassafras root beers, which to him tasted vaguely like licorice. The path wound all sorts of directions, in and out of the sun, but she led him in the direction they had initially been going, passing all sorts of shops selling books, jewelry, and clothing. "You ready for class tomorrow?" she asked. He shrugged. "I actually have my first game tomorrow." "I thought the game was on Friday." He nodded, saying, "JV is tomorrow. They want me to get some experience as soon as I can." "You nervous?" "Oh, hell yeah. I'm playing a position I've never played before." "Is it a home game?" "Yeah." "Well, I'll be there to cheer you on." "What do you know about football?" "I know that that's the one where you run and throw the ball, right?" He nodded once, lips pressed together. "That's pretty accurate." "When you score, it's called a touchdown, right?" "Yes, it is." "My dad and brothers like sports. My mom likes nothing, and me and my sister like My Little Ponies. I do know that the Green Bay Packers went to the Super Bowl last year and lost. They won the year before. My dad had parties both times. Last year I watched and I didn't have a clue." Some shirtless guy in leather pants was performing some stunts with a whip in the grassy section on their left. A good-sized crowd gathered and watched, oohing and eyeing as the whip crackled and snapped. "Let's go watch that guy," she said. They stood near the back as the guy poured gasoline on the whip and lit it on fire before swinging it around again. Jason thought that was pretty cool. He felt the heat from the whip and from the sun overhead and hoped it would cool down a bit tomorrow afternoon for the game. He didn't care to play in the heat. Courtney kind of bounced up and down, knees flexing as she watched. The whip guy was cool, but she wanted to move on. "What's your schedule like?" she asked, looking up at him, sipping from her clear plastic cup. He shrugged. "I think I have math first hour, then Spanish and English." "I have calc and then physics and comp and French," she said. "I have all my honors classes in the morning." "Yeah, I don't have any honors classes," he said. "I didn't do too well last year, but I passed everything. I got enough credits to be able to have a study hall 7th hour all year." "Well, that's some nice free time." "Yeah." Man, he didn't know what to say. He felt this queasiness start up in his gut, like at the first few practices. He didn't think he'd throw up this time, but it felt like all his organs were on a roller coaster, and Courtney was being so nice. The crowd applauded, and Jason shook his head, knowing he missed some grand finale or something. Courtney clapped, holding her cup in one hand. The whip guy thanked everyone and said he'd be back in 2 hours, and the crowd clapped again and dispersed. "What else do you want to see?" she asked. "What else is there?" "Well, there's jousting at the far end. There's usually an acrobat show, a Robin Hood show, the mud show." None of that sounded too interesting, and he just wasn't feeling all that great. He hoped she didn't notice. She did, and then just figured they should do something real low-key. "Or we could walk around," she suggested. "Let's do that. And I'll hold it right there." All right, so number of things that we thought we would talk about on today's show. One had to do with voice and performance, and actually Walter and I were talking about this before the show. Walter, what is it that about voice, about performance that you're interested in?
I don't know if you noticed or not, but before you even read your piece, you were describing your piece, and leading up to it, it was a very natural voice that you were using. And then as soon as you started reading that piece, you went into your reading voice, your presentation voice, which I think is kind of what your inside head is like when you're writing it out down on paper. You try to get that your presenter voice out there, that artistic voice, to make everybody listen. Because if you say it in this way, you put it in them words, it comes out more meaningful to not only you but to the reader then. And I think I do that too. Speech and writing are almost, they're very similar, trying to get across a point to people with words, except one is with hearing and one is with sight. But otherwise, I think they're basically the same. And I think with your writing, everybody's writing that I've seen so far, you can tell that inner voice is there on their page. I think it would be interesting one day if we have a bunch of readers in here, like switch stories around and see and have somebody else read it, and then have maybe somebody at the end try to guess whose was whose. Because
that's exactly a game that I play in all of my workshop classes at school. After we've had a chance to hear at least one piece by everyone, and not just from what they wrote in class, but substantial piece that goes on for 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. And after we hear at least that one piece from everyone, the next round of what we read from is what I will do at the end. And we read the stuff out loud. And if it's a longer piece, I always try to get the author of the piece to read a little bit of it. And if it's a longer piece, I'll have someone else read it. And sometimes I'll try to mix up who reads it first and who reads it last. But then at the end, I always ask the class, okay, whose piece is this? And this was a game that when I played it as a student in these same classes, I was very terrible at. But what we would do when we were asked, whose piece do you think this is, we were asked to say why. What did you notice about the piece? What did you hear about the voice? And sometimes it was because of subject matter or the story. It's like, oh yeah, I know it's her piece because she's been writing that all semester. But then we still ask the students, but what about the voice, or what about the structure that makes it so and so's writing? And it's been fun to now do that with my high school students right now, because we're in the middle of the program and they've all had we've been playing this game now for 2 or 3 days, and they're all doing a really good job of, if they don't guess right, they're right in why they guess, because they have been listening and they know that so and so does this in the writing. So even if they guess the piece wrong, they still are right on with guessing with that other person's voice.
It's like Troy's piece. You could that's only like the 5th piece I've heard of yours to the last piece that you read, and I could totally tell that was definitely your writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the way that you read it too was the way you would read that piece.
Yeah.
I would have read it completely different, and probably would have, the meaning might even got changed by me reading it.
Yeah, I think that's really important too. And it's funny you bring that up, because I think about that, because I've done public speaking in the past, and obviously here, at WGTD, I always think about, when I write it, how is it going to sound when I read it? And it's hard because I have to balance how I would read it to how someone who reads it on their own would perceive it. And so that's always the balance for me, is making sure that the voice translates no matter who's doing that, and that's difficult.
That's very hard, yeah.
That's always, I'm not going to call it a problem, but I am going to call it a problem when I read other people's work, especially here on the air, and when I get a chance to read Richard Bell's pieces, because he's got this rhythm to his stuff. I mean, he's got the words on the page just so, and I've heard him read enough of his pieces overall, his sense of humor and his style, and I've got an ear for it. And when I read it out loud, and I always try to read his pieces at least once before reading them on the air, so I can sort of get that rhythm, but I always understand that it's his piece, it's his voice, it's coming through my mouth, but there's always going to be a part or a section or two that I'm just not going to nail the way he would probably want it to be nailed. I'm going to come close, and there's been a few other people on this show who have read from his works. I know Lisa's read from his works. My brother's read from his works, and I think my brother does the best at getting Rich's pieces. I don't know if you ever heard my brother
No, I haven't.
read Rich's pieces on the show. But I think no one can do it better than the author themselves.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've actually been talking about with my class today. You and I were talking about this out in the parking lot before the show, Walter. This idea of we only have the words to work with, and we don't have like pictures and things like that. And once you pass it off to a teacher, you pass it off to an agent or a publisher, it's out of your hands. So if there's a way you want the words to be heard in people's minds when they read it to themselves or when they read it out loud, it's got to be on the page that way. And I think whether you're playing around with grammar and putting everything in all capitals or in italics or just messing around with punctuation, I mean, that's all you got to make it come across the way you want it to. And I don't know how, if you want to talk more about that.
Oh, yeah, that's totally
Troy.
true. Yeah. Like an author, I hate to use an example, but Stephen King, his work's very noticeable. When he was Richard Bachman, he got found out just because, you could tell it was a Stephen King story. And not only because of the voice that came through it, the way he incorporates in his writing little like blurbs of newspaper articles or little, open sign. They're just the little stuff that he incorporates into his work, and you could tell right away that's a Stephen King story. And I hope I try to do that with my writing. I try to incorporate them little I don't know, walliness you would call it into my work. And I don't know if you knew when you were reading this story for that flash fiction contest, because they were all nameless, so you had to turn in a copy with no names. I don't know if you recognize that was me, but I'm sure you were like, well, this sounds probably a lot like a Wally story.
I remember there were two pieces that I read that I think Walter wrote one of these. I'm pretty sure,
Yeah.
Well, talking about voice is a really tricky. Voice is really tricky to define, and one of my colleagues and friends down at school, he wrote many years ago this really wonderful article about voice. And we all have our own unique voice. It's who we are. It's like our fingerprint, is how I heard someone describe it once. That's probably how I described it on this show or with the group at one point. It sounds familiar to me. But when we have our writing voices, we have our speaking voices. The voices of the stories have their own voices when you start working on them. The voices of your characters have their own voices. So there's a lot of voices going in and out. And in the end, it's all you, because you're writing it. But, it's, and especially in first drafts, it's so hard to figure all these things out. You drive yourself crazy if you think about it all. Yeah. But once you have some of these drafts and once you start rewriting and tinkering, you get to figure all these things out. But, I would like to think that, except for knowing the material, that, people would know, especially people that know me and have heard my work can tell, oh, yeah, that sounds something like Chris wrote. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were saying, how the story has a, voice of its own. And I'm kind of a freestyle writer, so I kind of like just to sit down, or I'll get an idea at 12 in the midnight or 6 a.m. and I just have to go with it and start it. And I'll read it through and I'll say, this is not what I wanted. This is not the story, the message that I wanted to convey. So I have to go through, but I'll like certain parts and kind of tinkering with it to get it to where, I need it to be. And so, yeah, that's very interesting you said that, because I've dealt with that, is that the story can take you in so many different directions and it has its own voice once you get started.
Yeah, I believe that they totally take a life of their own on, especially after you've developed a draft, and I also believe that writing needs time to gestate. And I'm of the belief that when you write something, unless the deadline for it is tomorrow, you've probably been working on it in your head for a while, but there's something to be said for writing it, getting through the movement as much you can, or getting through the draft, however long it takes you to do that, an hour, a day, 100 years, whatever it takes, that it still needs to sit and it needs to breathe and become its own. And then you can come back to it with a fresh set of eyes, and you become aware of the voice of the thing, and probably more aware of what it is that the piece is about, and then you can start to reshape it, reconfigure it, redo whatever you need to do with it before it becomes, before it's out there.
Yeah.
I just gave that advice to a new writer. Let it sit, like you said, to write something else, go read something for a while, come back to it in a week or two, and then reread it. You'll be surprised to go, I didn't write that. That's kind of crappy. So always let it sit, go back and relook at it again, and you'll see where you aren't in the piece, where you can make yourself in there again.
Yeah, and that's what I like about the program at Columbia College, because it only meets once a week. You know, and if you do a workshop every week, you know, you start writing something in class and it's not due until the next week. So you have a week to work on it, a week to sit on it. I know there are some students, you know, who's like, oh, I'm just going to do this night before class. You know, and you got some students who will start working on it that night, you know, and work on it every day, you know. So, I mean, everyone has their own process. And I think the ones that are really serious about the writing at some point discover that you're not, just because you think that you might do your bestest writing under pressure, like the day before it's due, usually not. I mean, you can go with some really good things, and there's probably a lot of gold in there, you know, but, you know, to let these things sit and understand, you know, that it takes time to craft these things, to put them in drafts and do all sorts of things with it. So, you know, I mean, everyone just becomes aware of their own process with these things.
You know, it's funny you say that, because I was always that student who would start that day and, you know, the day it was assigned, and kind of work through it, you know, till the day before. And even before class, I'd just finalize it, make sure it was good. But I'd also give a day to kind of study the inflections. What were the emotional points? What were the high points, the low points? You know, there was a PowerPoint I did, and not to toot my own horn, but there's this lady cried, you know, and I was like, as evil as this sounds, that's what I wanted, you know, like, because I think that PowerPoints and merging technology with the writing can be extremely powerful, and I try to do that.
Sure.
So yeah, it's very interesting to kind of start, and I hated those students who were just like, I'll do it the night before, and then they would get a C, you know, and I'm busting my, you know, for an A. But yeah, I always would start. It's the best thing to do, to start as soon as you can.
Yeah, and I remember even, you know, going into my first year of grad school, even in the same program I did my undergrad work in, I mean, there were still plenty of times where I just didn't have the time to get to it until the night before, 2 nights before. And sometimes that's just what it is.
Yeah, happens. Yeah.
Now, Walter, you were also talking about performing, and you said you've got a performance coming up. Or?
Oh yes, quick plug: Fusion downtown. It's the old Grand Central, downtown Kenosha. First Mondays and third Mondays of every month, they have an open mic for anybody: poems, poetry, short stories, music, comedy, whatever. So I'm going to go down there this coming Monday, and I'm going to try to memorize as much of that Great Dictator speech as possible, at least so I can keep eye contact with the audience. I think that it's a speech that you kind of got to keep the audience with you. So I'm going to try to keep most of it memorized, and so I wanted a little practice today, so I figured I'd come here and read that. Would you guys do me one favor, though, to show how different everybody's voice really is? Can you read, where is it? One of the best parts in here, of course, because you're not machine and you're not cattle. But if you could read, both of you, if you could just read that one paragraph. Starting with soldiers.
All right. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine hearts and machine minds. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate. Only the unloved hate. The unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery. Fight for liberty.
Alrighty. Soldiers, don't give yourself to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines. You are not cattle. You are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate. Only the unloved hate. The unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery. Fight for liberty.
Now, you guys didn't practice this at all. I never showed you this.
No,
before.
this is the first
Nope.
time I've
Nope.
seen this.
And now Charlie Chaplin's voice is in there, but everybody added their own voice over to what he had written, and I think that's what you're trying to say on how difficult, how many voices are there flowing through even somebody else's work when you're reading it. It's you add your voice to their voice.
I think the biggest thing to pay attention here to is that there are lots of exclamation points on this page.
Yeah.
So you've got to give that extra added effect.
Yeah.
And this is like a crazy thing. I know we've only got a few more minutes here. But what I heard once I started reading this, there was one of the lines about it, like don't give yourselves to brutes. And as soon as I heard that, oh God, this is nuts and embarrassing. What I heard in my voice was Obi-Wan Kenobi telling Luke as he's leaving Dagobah and the Empire Strikes Back, Luke, don't give in to hate. That leads to the dark side.
And ladies and gentlemen, Chris is wearing a Star Wars T-shirt, just to let you know.
All coincidence. So, but then there are other words that I hear from other speeches given in movies, and whenever I find that I'm reading, whether it's someone else's work or my own work, and there's a word or a line that I recognize that's from something else I know, it's just I can't really control it. I know I can, so I maybe I don't control it, but I just sort of go into that voice just for a little bit. And that's, just how I feel the emphasis has to be on the page, So, this is a topic we can go on and on about. The one last thing that I will say in regards to, Walter, you're telling me that, when I was trying to summarize my story in my voice and then I went into my reading voice, what's really eerie about that is that normally when I'm reading something of my own and I'm summarizing it, I write it all down first. And then sometimes I'm reading it, and sometimes it's a mix of my presenting voice and then my reading voice. And, I came into the studio today without my regular introductory and closing notes, so I was just sort of winging it, and that's not the first time that I've done that. So I think there's a difference in my voice when I'm winging it, because I'll just, close my eyes and think about, okay, this is what I normally say because I've been doing this for 3 years, and you would think I would have this all memorized, and for the most part I do, but, I'm always trying to make sure that it's right, and sometimes my voice gets cut off in one of those things. So
No, you did great. The opening was great.
wait till we get to the closing. We'll see what I can all remember. So, all right. Well, this has been a production of the Kenosha Writers Guild. And if you're interested in joining the Kenosha Writers Guild, they meet every third Thursday at the Hedberg Library at Carthage College here in Kenosha. It is free and open to the public, so feel free to come in and listen in to writers sharing their work. If you have your own work that you want to share and bring it in, you certainly can do that. And on the second Thursdays of every month, they have specialized meetings. Sometimes they are in-depth critiques and guest speakers and all sorts of things. So please check out the Kenosha Writers Guild on the internet at kenosha-writersguild.com. And if you're interested in participating on this show, please check out the Facebook page for Speaking of Our Words. Please check us out on YouTube, Speaking of Our Words, and watch for the submission guidelines to come in. Like us on Facebook and YouTube and get involved in the email, whatever it is that we send out for the Kenosha Writers Guild to check out those submission guidelines. So, all right. So thank you, everyone. Thank you guys for being on the show today. Thank you, Richard Bell, for your piece. Thank you, Walter Gascoigne and Troy McDonald. Thank you to Lisa Adamowitz-Kless and the Kenosha Writers Guild, David Cole and Steve Brown and WGTD HD. And I believe that's it. My name is Chris DeGuire. The world needs your stories. We will see you again soon. Thank you very much.